Nobody saw this coming. Not like this. Because what just allegedly went down between Kendrick Lamar and J. Cole isn't just tension. It's confrontation. And it all circles back to one name that continues to divide the entire hip-hop world. Drake. Now listen closely, because this isn't just another rumor floating around online. This is about a private moment that was never supposed to be public. A behind-the-scenes interaction. That somehow leaked. And according to multiple insider claims, Kendrick Lamar didn't just disagree with J. Cole. He pressed him directly. No cameras, no audience. Just raw, unfiltered energy between two of the most respected artists in the game. But here's where it gets even more intense. Because the confrontation wasn't random. It wasn't casual. It was about something very specific. Cole, someone known for staying neutral, had reportedly taken a stance. A stance that, according to sources, didn't sit right with Kendrick. And Kendrick? He didn't let it slide. Now imagine that for a second. Two lyrical giants, two voices of a generation, face to face, tension building, words exchanged that nobody was supposed to hear. Until now, because what's being said about that moment? It's raising serious questions about loyalty, about alliances, and about what's really happening behind the scenes in hip-hop right now. So the real question is, what exactly did Kendrick say, and how did J. Cole respond? Stay with me, because what we're about to uncover next changes everything. To understand why this moment is hitting the way it is right now, you have to look at the history. Not just recent events, not just surface-level tension, but the deeper, unspoken dynamic between three of the biggest names in modern hip-hop. Kendrick Lamar, J. Cole, Drake. Because for years, these three weren't seen as enemies. They were seen as the big three. Different styles, different energies, but all at the top. Kendrick, introspective, calculated, surgical with his words. Cole, balanced, thoughtful, often playing the middle ground. Drake, dominant, strategic, always present in the mainstream conversation. And for a long time, there was a kind of respect. Maybe not friendship, maybe not full alignment, but respect. They collaborated, they referenced each other, they competed, but in a way that felt controlled, until it didn't. Because over the past year, that balance started shifting. Subtle at first, a line here, a verse there, a tone that felt different. Fans started noticing, breaking down lyrics, comparing interviews, looking for signs. And then came the moment that changed everything. Kendrick dropped verses that many interpreted as direct shots. Not vague, not hidden, but intentional. Lines that questioned dominance. Lines that challenged positions. Lines that made people ask, is this aimed at Drake? And just like that, the conversation exploded. Because if Kendrick was stepping into that space, then the balance was officially broken. Now here's where J. Cole comes in, because Cole has always been seen as the neutral one, the peacemaker, the artist who can exist in the same conversation without fueling conflict. But recently, that perception started to shift, in interviews, in lyrics, in subtle statements. Cole appeared to lean just slightly toward a position, not aggressive, not confrontational, but enough for people to notice. Enough for people to start asking, is Cole siding with Drake? And in hip-hop, perception matters, because even a small shift can be seen as a statement. Now imagine how that might look from Kendrick's perspective. If you're stepping into a competitive space, if you're challenging positions, if you're making it clear that you're not backing down, and someone who's always been neutral suddenly appears to take a side, that changes things. Because now it's not just competition, it's alignment. And according to multiple insider-style reports, that's exactly what led to the moment we're talking about. A private interaction, a closed-door conversation between Kendrick Lamar and J. Cole. Now here's what makes this even more intense. Because this wasn't a public exchange. No diss tracks, no social media posts, no interviews. This was direct. According to sources, the meeting happened in a controlled setting, possibly backstage, possibly at a private event. Details are still unclear, but what's consistent across reports is the energy. Tense, focused, unavoidable. Because Kendrick didn't approach this casually, he approached it with intent. Now let's pause for a second, because this is where things get really interesting. According to the claims, Kendrick's issue wasn't just about Drake, it was about what Drake represents. Dominance, influence, control over the mainstream narrative. And if Kendrick is challenging that, then anyone perceived as supporting it becomes part of the conversation, including Cole. Now again, none of this is officially confirmed. But the consistency of the reports, the timing of recent lyrics, the shift in tone across all three artists, it's enough to make people pay attention. And here's where it gets even deeper. Because fans have started connecting dots that go beyond just this moment. Past collaborations, past interviews, moments where these three artists crossed paths. Looking back and asking, was there tension we didn't notice? Because sometimes, what looks like respect on the surface is actually competition underneath. And competition, in hip-hop, it doesn't stay quiet forever. Meanwhile, none of the three, Kendrick, Cole, or Drake, have made any direct public statements about this alleged confrontation. No confirmations, no denials, just silence. And if you've been paying attention to everything we've covered so far, you already know, silence doesn't calm things down. It makes them louder, because now the story is being shaped by insider claims, fan interpretations, lyric breakdowns, and speculation that keeps growing. And the longer that silence continues, the more intense the narrative becomes, because people aren't just asking, what happened? They're asking, what does this mean? Does this signal a real divide? A shift in alliances? A moment that could change how these three artists interact moving forward? Or is this something being misunderstood? Blown out of proportion by speculation and timing? Right now, nobody knows for sure, but what we do know is that this situation didn't stay private for long. Because just when people thought this was just a quiet, behind-the-scenes moment, something surfaced. Something that gives us a glimpse into what might have actually been said. And trust me, if what's being reported is even close to accurate, then this isn't just tension, it's something much bigger. And what comes next takes this story to a whole different level. Just when people thought this was all speculation, that's when the first real details of the confrontation started leaking out. And what insiders are claiming, it's way more intense than anyone expected. According to multiple sources, the moment between Kendrick Lamar and J. Cole wasn't just a conversation, it was a challenge. Direct, focused, and impossible to ignore. The setting, still unclear. Some say backstage at a private industry event. Others claim it happened in a studio environment. Closed off, controlled, away from cameras. But every version agrees on one thing. The energy shifted the moment Kendrick walked in. Because this wasn't small talk. This wasn't catching up. This was intentional. One source described it like this. You could feel it before anything was said. Kendrick came in with a purpose. Now imagine that for a second. No crowd, no music. Just two artists standing face to face, both aware of what's been said publicly and what hasn't. And then it started. According to reports, Kendrick didn't ease into the conversation. He went straight to the point. Why are you speaking on it like that? No buildup, no softness, just a direct question. Now pause. Because that line alone, it tells you everything about the tone. This wasn't curiosity, it was confrontation. And J. Cole? He didn't back down. Sources claim he responded calmly, but firmly. I said what I said. That's it. No long explanation, no apology. Just a statement. And just like that, the tension escalated. Because now this wasn't just about perception anymore, it was about positions. According to insiders, Kendrick pushed further. Not louder. Not aggressive in a physical sense, but sharper, more precise. You picking sides now? That question. That's the one people keep coming back to, because it cuts straight to the core of everything, and this is where the situation takes its first major twist. Because instead of denying it, instead of stepping back into neutrality, J. Cole reportedly said something that completely changed the dynamic. I'm standing on what's real. Wait, what does that even mean? Because that response doesn't confirm a side, but it doesn't deny one either. And according to sources in the room, that's when everything shifted. Because Kendrick didn't see that as neutral, he saw it as alignment. And from that point on, the conversation wasn't just tense, it was layered. According to one insider, Kendrick made it clear that this wasn't just about Drake. It was about the message, the influence, the narrative being built around who's at the top. And here's the part that really stands out. Because Kendrick allegedly said, "This ain't about him. It's about what y'all letting happen." Now stop right there. Because that line, that changes everything. Because now it's not just about Drake. It's about everyone connected to the situation. Everyone contributing to the perception. Everyone shaping the conversation, including Cole. And that's where things got even more intense. Because according to reports, Cole didn't argue. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't escalate. He stayed calm. But what he said next, that's what nobody expected. "I'm not here to play roles in your narrative." That line, that's the twist. Because now, instead of being pulled into Kendrick's perspective, Cole positioned himself outside of it. Not siding, not opposing, but refusing to be part of it. And that might have been the most powerful move in the entire exchange. Because now the dynamic flips. Kendrick is pressing, Cole is standing still. And when pressure meets stillness, it creates friction. According to one source, the room went quiet after that. Not awkward, not uncomfortable, just heavy. Because both sides had made their positions clear, without yelling, without chaos, without spectacle, just words. But here's where things take another unexpected turn. Because as this story started spreading, another detail surfaced. And this one, nobody saw coming. According to a separate insider, the confrontation didn't end with tension. It ended with something else. Respect. Wait, what? That's right. One report claims that after everything was said, after the questions, after the responses, there was a moment, no words, just eye contact, a pause. And then Kendrick nodded. No agreement, no resolution, but acknowledgement. And Cole? He nodded back. Now, if that's true, then this wasn't just a conflict. It was something deeper, a recognition. Because in hip-hop, confrontation doesn't always mean division. Sometimes, it means clarity. But here's the thing. That detail, it hasn't been confirmed, and not everyone believes it. Because other reports suggest the tension didn't fully resolve, that the conversation ended without closure, that both artists walked away with their positions unchanged. And if that's the case, then what we're looking at isn't a moment that ended something. It's a moment that started something. Because now the question isn't just what happened in that room. It's what happens next. Do these tensions stay private? Do they show up in music, in interviews, in subtle lines that fans will spend weeks decoding? Or does this situation escalate into something more public, more direct, more impossible to ignore? Because if there's one thing we know about artists at this level, they don't just let moments like this disappear, they respond. And just when people thought they had a handle on what happened, another piece of information started circulating. Something that doesn't just add detail, but completely changes how this entire situation might be understood. And trust me, this next reveal, it raises questions nobody is ready to answer. Just when it seemed like the confrontation between Kendrick Lamar and J. Cole had already reached its peak, that's when things escalated in a way nobody expected. And this time, it didn't come from a room. It didn't come from insiders. It came from the music. Because fans started noticing something. Something subtle at first, but once it clicked, it changed everything. A snippet. That's all it was. A short clip, low quality, no official release, circulating across forums and fan pages. But the voice? Unmistakable. Kendrick. And in that snippet, there was a line. A single line that sent the entire internet into chaos. Don't stand next to me if you standing for him. Now pause. Because that line, it hit hard. Because it didn't sound vague. It didn't sound like general competition. It sounded personal. And immediately people started connecting it to the confrontation. Because if Kendrick really said that, then this wasn't just a private disagreement anymore. It was spilling into the art. And in hip-hop, once it hits the music, there's no going back. Now here's where things get even more intense. Because just hours after that snippet started spreading, another clip surfaced. This time, not Kendrick, Cole. And his tone? Completely different. Calm, measured, but direct. The line reportedly went, "I ain't choosing sides. I'm choosing peace, but don't mistake that for weakness." Wait. Now everything feels even more complicated. Because on one side you have Kendrick, sharp, focused, seemingly drawing a line. On the other, you have Cole, refusing to engage the same way but still making a statement. And right in the middle of all of this, Drake. Silent. No response, no post, no reaction. And somehow, that silence is making everything louder. Because now people are asking, is Drake watching this unfold? Is he letting it play out? Or is he preparing to respond in his own way? But just when it seemed like the situation couldn't get more layered, the biggest reveal dropped. And this one didn't come from music. It came from someone who wasn't even supposed to be part of the story. A producer, not a headline name. Not someone constantly in the spotlight, but someone who, according to their own words, was present during parts of the interaction between Kendrick and Cole. They posted a now-deleted message that read, "Y'all think this about Drake. It's way deeper than that." Way deeper. That line alone sent people into overdrive, because now the narrative shifts again. If it's not just about Drake, then what is it about? According to interpretations of that post, the issue might not be about one artist. It might be about position, power, influence over the direction of hip-hop itself. Because think about it. Kendrick represents one lane. Precision, lyricism, intent. Drake represents another. Reach, dominance, cultural impact across multiple spaces. And Cole? He's been moving between both. So if Kendrick is challenging something, and Cole is refusing to fully align, then this isn't just about a person. It's about a direction. And that's where things get even more intense. Because fans started going back. Old interviews, old verses, old moments where these three names crossed paths. Looking for signs, looking for tension, looking for anything that might suggest this has been building longer than we thought. And some of what they found? It's making people rethink everything. Lines that once felt like friendly competition now sound sharper. Moments that once felt like mutual respect now feel more calculated, and suddenly, this doesn't look like a sudden conflict. It looks like a slow build. Meanwhile, none of the three artists have made any official statements. No confirmations, no denials, just music. Just silence. Just movement. And in hip-hop, that combination, it's dangerous because it keeps people guessing, watching, waiting. And just when it seemed like the situation had reached its highest point, another twist started circulating. One that doesn't just add tension, but raises a completely new question. Because according to new whispers online, there may have been a third conversation, not between Kendrick and Cole, not involving Drake directly, but connected. A conversation that allegedly happened after the confrontation. And if what's being said about it is true, then everything we've seen so far might just be the surface. Because this next detail doesn't just escalate the situation, it reframes it. And trust me, If this part comes out publicly, this won't just be a moment, it'll be a turning point, for all three of them. At this point, the internet didn't just react, it erupted. What started as whispers about a private confrontation between Kendrick Lamar and J. Cole had now turned into a full-scale cultural debate. And right at the center of it all was the silent presence of Drake. But this wasn't just fans arguing anymore. This was the entire hip-hop community picking sides. First, the Kendrick supporters, and they came in loud. Kendrick finally saying what needed to be said. This ain't beef, it's accountability. If you're standing next to Drake, you're part of the problem. To them, Kendrick wasn't starting drama. He was challenging the system, calling out what they believe is a narrative that's been allowed to dominate for too long. But then came the Cole supporters, and they weren't backing down either. Cole is the only one staying real in this situation. Not everything needs to turn into a war. Refusing to pick sides is strength, not weakness. And just like that, the internet split in half. Team Kendrick, Team Cole. And then there were those watching closely, waiting for one person to finally speak. Drake. Because his silence? It's not going unnoticed. Some fans are calling it strategic. Drake always moves last. Watch what happens. Others see it differently. He's letting them argue while he stays above it. And that uncertainty, it's fueling everything. Then came the influencers. YouTubers, podcasters, commentators, all breaking down every line, every snippet, every rumored interaction. One viral breakdown said, "This isn't about who's better anymore. It's about who defines the culture." That statement alone, it shifted the conversation. Because now people aren't just debating lyrics, they're debating influence, legacy, control over the narrative of hip-hop itself. And then came the industry voices, subtle at first, a few tweets, a few cryptic posts, but then it got more direct. One artist posted, "Y'all turning competition into division. That's not what this is." Another responded, "Or maybe it's always been that, and now it's just visible." Now pause. Because that exchange? It hit deeper than people expected, because it suggests something important, that this moment might not be new. It might just be exposed. Meanwhile, producers, DJs, and insiders started weighing in. Some claim this is healthy competition, a necessary push that keeps the culture evolving. Others, they're calling it a fracture. And when the top starts dividing like this, it trickles down. And that's where things get serious, because if this situation escalates, it doesn't just stay between three artists. It affects collaborations, events, the entire ecosystem. And still, no official statements. Not from Kendrick Lamar, not from J. Cole, not from Drake. And at this point, that silence is louder than anything being said, because every hour that passes without clarification, the narrative grows, expands, evolves. Fans start analyzing older songs again, looking for hidden meanings, reinterpreting lines that once felt harmless. And suddenly, everything feels connected. Because when tension reaches this level, nothing exists in isolation anymore. And then came the moment that pushed this conversation even further, and a major commentator asked a simple question. If this turns into a full public exchange, who actually wins? That question, it stopped people in their tracks. Because for the first time, it forced everyone to think beyond the drama. Because if Kendrick escalates, if Cole responds, if Drake enters the conversation, this doesn't just become a moment, it becomes history. And right now, we're standing right at the edge of it. Because just when it seemed like the situation couldn't get any more intense, a final piece of information started circulating, quietly, subtly, but powerful enough to change everything. Because this next detail, it doesn't just add to the story, it forces you to question what this was really about from the beginning. And trust me, once you hear it, you won't look at this situation the same way again. Just when it felt like the story had reached its peak, Just when fans had chosen sides, analysts had broken everything down, and the tension couldn't possibly rise any higher. That's when the final twist surfaced. And this one? This one doesn't just add to the story. It changes how you see everything that came before it. It started with a rumor. Quiet, almost ignored at first, but then it started gaining traction. According to multiple insider-style claims, there wasn't just one confrontation, there were two. Wait, what? That's right. The first one, the one everyone's talking about between Kendrick Lamar and J. Cole, that might not have been the main event, because the second interaction, it allegedly involved a message, not face-to-face, not public, but direct. And that message was reportedly meant for Drake. Oh, now this is where things get really intense. Because according to these claims, Kendrick didn't just question Cole's stance. He made it clear that the situation wasn't staying contained. One source described it like this. That conversation with Cole, that was just the setup. The setup? If that's true, then everything we've seen so far, the tension, the lines and the snippets, the reactions, it's all leading somewhere. And that somewhere might be a direct confrontation between Kendrick and Drake. Now pause. Because if that happens, this isn't just a debate anymore. This isn't just speculation. This becomes one of the biggest moments in modern hip-hop. But here's where the twist gets even deeper. Because alongside those claims, another detail started circulating. That the message Kendrick allegedly sent wasn't aggressive. It was calculated, short, direct, and very intentional. Reportedly, it said something along the lines of, "Keep it music, or it becomes something else." Now think about that, because that line, it's not just a warning, it's a boundary. And depending on how you interpret it, it could mean very different things. Some see it as Kendrick setting the rules, keeping things within the art, within the culture, within the music. Others, they see it as something else entirely, a signal, a line being drawn, and if that line gets crossed, then this situation could escalate beyond anything we've seen so far. Meanwhile, Drake remains completely silent. No response, no acknowledgement, no reaction. And at this point, that silence is becoming the most powerful move in the entire situation. Because now everyone is watching him, waiting, expecting. And the longer he says nothing, the more unpredictable this becomes. Because in hip-hop, the response is everything. And right now, there hasn't been one. But here's the part that really makes this twist unsettling. Because according to one final insider claim, there's already a response. It just hasn't been released yet. Wait, what? That's right. A track. Unconfirmed. Unreleased, but reportedly recorded. And if the rumors are true, it involves all three names. Not directly, not explicitly, but enough to be understood. Now again, this is speculation, nothing confirmed. But the idea alone, it's enough to send the internet into overdrive. Because if that track drops, everything changes. Because then this isn't just tension, it's action. And once that happens, there's no going back. Because in hip-hop, once it leaves the studio, it belongs to the world, and the world is already watching. So now we're left with one question. What happens next? Does Kendrick escalate? Does Cole respond again? Does Drake finally break his silence? Or is there something even bigger coming that we haven't seen yet? Because if everything we've heard is true, then this story isn't ending, it's building. And the next move might be the one that defines all three of them. Now I want you to really think about everything we just covered. Because this situation, it's not simple. It's layered, it's evolving, and it's far from over. So let me ask you directly, what do you think is really happening here? Do you believe Kendrick Lamar is stepping in to challenge something bigger than just one artist? Or do you think this is being blown out of proportion by rumors and speculation? What about J. Cole? Is he playing it smart by staying neutral? Or is that neutrality actually a statement on its own? And then there's the biggest question of all. What is Drake going to do next? Because let's be real, his response, whenever it comes, could change everything. So I want you to go down to the comments right now and tell me, who's in the right here? Should this stay in the music or go beyond it? And if that rumored track drops, whose side are you on? Don't just watch this story, be part of it. Because conversations like this, they shape the culture. And if you want updates the second anything new happens, any new tracks, any real confirmations, any major twists, make sure you like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Because if there's one thing we've learned from this situation, it's that silence doesn't last forever. And when it breaks, it's going to be loud.